welcome back to WMMA Now with your host Chuck Stevenson, coming at you tonight with a fight review. So we're going to UFC 238 in Chicago, Illinois, to the strawweight division. Alexa Grasso coming in at 10-2, taking on Karolina Kowalkiewicz, coming in at 12-4. Grasso is coming in off a submission loss to Tatiana Suarez a year ago, preceded by a split decision win over Randa Marcos, whereas Karolina Kowalkiewicz is coming off 2 straight losses. First a knockout to Jessica Andrade, and then a unanimous decision to Michelle Waterson just 2 months ago. So before we get into these two fighters individually, let's take a look at how they match up stats-wise. So Kowalkiewicz is the older fighter, 33 to Grasso's 25. Right now, Grasso has a roughly better record at 10-2 to Kowalkiewicz's 12-4. Grasso will have a 2-inch height advantage, 5'5" to Kowalkiewicz's 5'3". And she will also have a 2-inch reach advantage, 66 inches, which is a very nice reach for a strawweight, to Kowalkiewicz's 64 inches. So now that we've looked at both of these fighters, let's take a look. Let's break them down individually. So we'll start with the lower ranked fighter, Alexa Grasso. So Grasso's strengths. Grasso has very strong boxing. She was taught first by her father and then by her uncle, Francisco Grasso, who was a pro boxer down in Mexico. The Lobo gym that her family runs is very strong boxing base. So she has very nice boxing. Along with that good boxing comes really good head movement. You know, you see Grasso, she's always moving her head around. She never keeps her head on the center line for too long, which is something very rare to see, really in MMA period, but especially in the women's. She has exceptional head movement for a female fighter in MMA. And then finally, she is fast with underrated power. She moves very fast, and you know she only has, I think, 1 stoppage win in the last several years. But I believe that her power is very underrated. After the first round of her fight against Heather Jo Clark went back to her corner and was complaining of having trouble seeing from the strikes of Grasso. So not only does she possess that speed, she has that underrated power as well. So since we've looked at Grasso's strengths, let's look at her keys to victory. The biggest thing Grasso is going to need to do is to stay at range. She has the height, she has the reach, and she has the boxing skills. So stay at boxing range. You know, use those punches, work behind a jab, and you know, stay at range. Stay out of the clinch with Karolina. That's the biggest thing, is stay at range and don't get into the clinch. She also needs to keep off the fence against Kowalkiewicz. Grasso has a habit of putting her back against the fence and then fighting off of it from there, which she does well, but you don't want to risk that against a very strong Muay Thai-based clinch fighter like Kowalkiewicz. So she's going to want to keep off of the fence. And then finally, Grasso is going to need to let her hands go. She's been very hesitant in her UFC career. It's a marked change from how she fought in Invicta. And I realize that, you know, she's broken her hands several times in the last couple of years, which usually tends to make a fighter a little hesitant to punch. But, you know, at this point, she needs to let her hands go against Karolina, because she has, like I said, she has the height, she has the reach, and she has the speed. So if she utilizes that speed and let the hands go, she can definitely cruise to the win here. Okay, so now that we've looked at Grasso, let's move up the rankings to Karolina Kowalkiewicz. So Kowalkiewicz's strengths. She has very strong knees in the clinch that she will use to sap the strength and the will out of her opponents. I know I always talk about this in her fights. Go back to the Rose Namajunas fight, round 2 and 3. She just, you know, sapped the will out of Namajunas with her clinch knees. So if she can get into the clinch and use those knees, she'll be gold. Kowalkiewicz also has underrated grappling. She more than held her own against Mizuki Inoue in Invicta, who is an accomplished grappler, and she more than held her own on the ground against Namajunas in their fight. And Namajunas is a very dynamic submission fighter. So Kowalkiewicz has a very underrated ground game. And then finally, she has a good chin on her, so she is willing to take a punch to give 3. You know, I was worried after her fight with Andrade that she might be hesitant to take the shots, but as we saw with Watterson, you know, she wasn't really phased by any of Watterson's shots and any of her punches or kicks. She still kept coming forward, and she's still willing to absorb the punches that she needs to get into the clinch, so she is still willing to, you know, take a punch to give 1 or 2 or 3. Okay, so that was Kowalkiewicz's strengths. Now let's look at her keys to victory. First off, she needs to get to the clinch. That is her bread and butter. That is her forte. She needs to get to the clinch to land some punches, land elbows, and especially land those knees that she does so well. So the first thing she needs to worry about is getting to the clinch. Another key for Kowalkiewicz is to take advantage of Grasso's mistakes. Grasso still makes these little mistakes, like earlier I mentioned that she tends to put herself on the fence, which Kowalkiewicz can use to get to the clinch that she needs. And sometimes Grasso sends out lazy low kicks or kicks to the body without properly setting them up. And other opponents have used them to take them down. Now Kowalkiewicz might not catch those kicks to take them down, but she can catch those kicks to land strikes of her own. So look for her to take advantage of those little mistakes that Grasso makes. And then finally, I think it would be advantageous for Kowalkiewicz to drag this fight out. And I mean, by dragging it out, I mean make it dirty, make it long, make it miserable for Alexa Grasso, and try to slow her down. I think that's would be a definite advantage for Kowalkiewicz. Okay, so that's the breakdown for each of the fighters, guys. So before I get to my decision, I want to put up a little bit of a disclaimer here. I am a huge fan of both of these fighters. You know, it's not too often that 2 of my favorite fighters get matched up, and this is definitely one of those ones where, you know, it's really hard for me to set aside my personal feelings and my fandom, and I had to really look at where each fighter is in their career. I had to look at the skills, how the skills match up. And at first I was thinking, you know, Kowalkiewicz, due to her vast experience against higher ranked opponents. But then I started to look at the X factor of, you know, what has Kowalkiewicz been doing lately? She's been talking about, even though she just signed a new contract with the UFC for, I believe, 6 more fights, she also has been talking about, you know, wanting to retire soon, maybe start a family. And as soon as fighters start talking about that kind of stuff, especially female fighters, to me that means that they've got 1 foot out the door, which means that they're distracted. And combine that with just the youth and the speed of Grasso, it forced me to pick Grasso by decision. I think her speed and her length is going to be too much for Kowalkiewicz to deal with. Kowalkiewicz is a much slower fighter, and as I said, that X factor of her possibly having 1 foot outside the door already leads me to pick Kowalkiewicz, which will unfortunately send Kowalkiewicz into a 3-fight losing streak. So that's it for my breakdown. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below and who you think is going to win. Thumbs ups are always appreciated. And what are you waiting for? Subscribe to WMMA now, the best, fastest growing women's mixed martial arts dedicated platform on YouTube. And we'll see you next time.